Hey everyone, this is Jared Holst from IronHistory.com. I believe this is my fifth interview in my kind of Men of Iron series, which is just I'm trying to interview people that, while they might not be the most famous people in the iron game, they've lived their life with weights and the iron game, and they all have interesting stories to tell. And really not many people have more interesting story to tell than Jan Dellinger here. Jan, I know he said it before, and I think it's a good analogy. He says he kind of lived his life of Forrest Gump in the iron game because he just interacted with so many different people with his job as the editor and probably the last living, correct me if I'm wrong, but last living office employee of York Barbell Company. So we're just going to get into it. Thanks for being with us, Jan. I really appreciate it.
You're
We've known
welcome.
You're welcome. Thank you. We've
Yeah.
known each other online for, I don't know, over 10, 15 years now, but and you actually took me and Dave Hartnett, York Barbell Hall of Fame tour about 10, 12 years ago or so. That
Right.
was great. You had a mustache then. I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And anyway, so let's get into it. So before I even get to York, why don't you just tell us when you were born and where you grew up, and then how you got started with weights and interested in fitness or exercise.
Okay. I was born in York County, Red Lion. That's my home. I still live in Red Lion. 1951, June of 1951. It was sort of an agrarian kind of area. By the way, can you see me? I got a block on my screen.
Yeah, I can see you fine. I can see you
Okay,
fine.
well then I'll let this go. But
You can move it around. Maybe it went to sleep or something. But I can,
well, anyway, if you can see me, that's
yeah, I
fine.
can see you fine.
Uh,
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, like I said, was born in 1951 here at the York Hospital, and I was raised around. I live in Red Line now, pretty much, except for I went to college. I've always lived in Red Line. I got into okay. I was sort of always intrigued by guys of strength. For instance, at the local York Fair here, we had the Mighty Atom. Joe
Mm,
Greenstein came here for years and years and years. I got to see him one time in 1961, I think. Um, gave an exhibition stand out there on the promenade cement, bending horseshoes and did his pitch and stuff like that. I had soap. I think he had soap and some
yeah,
other stuff.
I have some of the soap over there actually. Over there.
Right.
You probably put that up.
Um, that kind of served me well, a few decades later when his grandson Steve was trying to organize a documentary about his grandfather. They were having trouble finding people that had seen him, and I saw him once. And to be honest with you, here's this old guy who was, I was used to. I think what I thought of at the time were like professional wrestlers and maybe occasional bodybuilder, weightlifter. He had a different look to him altogether.
Oh yeah.
Standing there, like I say, it was a Saturday afternoon. I came out of the poultry pens with my dad, and there he was. And here's this old guy, long flowing hair, and no shirt on, but had like dress trousers and stand there bending these horseshoes and things. And I, coming from like I say, a semi-agrarian area, I had some idea of the strength of a horseshoe, and there weren't many guys that could do that.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, my first thought was, this guy's a little scary. Uh, anyway, I was standing with my dad. And my dad didn't seem to be bothered by him, so I thought, okay. And anyway, so we went on, and I started watching professional wrestling when I was in junior high school. And at the time, particularly here in the Northeast, Bruno Sammartino was the rage.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the it guy. So I was used to seeing him and some of these other big guys, and anyway, I would go up to town here in Redline. I lived about a mile outside of it. I walk up to the cut rate drugstore and look at some of these pulp wrestling magazines, like Pro
Mhm.
Wrestling Illustrated. I think at the time, Bill Apter put them out. I think Bill Apter is still putting them out. And wanted to see pictures of Bruno. And of course, I saw some of the other guys. But in the back of one of these pulp wrestling magazines was an ad for the Bruno bodybuilding course. And I don't know that I was into it just for bodybuilding. I just want to see pictures of Bruno.
Yeah.
So I, saved up box tops or whatever, took money and sent off and got the thing. And it came back and it had these pictures in it, but he had these like 5, 6 barbell exercises. along with some of the old Indian push-ups, squats,
Mhm.
that kind of, some chins, little running. I mean, it was an ideal course for like a 14-year-old boy
Yeah, yeah.
just getting into this stuff.
It's
And so I
funny.
saw,
Like, those are two influences you mentioned. The Mighty Atom and Bruno are both things that you got to imagine how many other little boys had the same kind of experience. Because I've
oh,
heard that story, both those stories before. I mean, actually,
oh yeah.
Slim Hammerman used to look at the Mighty Atom when he was younger. I think maybe Richard Sword, I'm not sure, but also Bruno, Bruno Sammartino is before my time, but you hear that as an influence all the time. I don't actually own that course. It's actually pretty rare. I know I've seen it go up for quite a bit
Would
of
you like
money.
to have a copy of it?
Sure. But
Hang on, let me get
I've
it.
seen pictures of it, and he's massive. He's just massive,
Well,
massive dude.
at that time he weighed about 265 and could move well. Um, Hang on a second here. I think I've got an extra one, or I can get a copy of an extra one
Yeah,
and send you
I
the
really
whole thing.
appreciate that. I'm gonna put a few photos up. I know you say you don't have a lot of photos yourself, but like I'm gonna
Yeah.
put some photos up of the course and stuff
What
while we're
what
later on.
what what is your address?
Well, I'll give it to you later.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I'll
Hang
give it
on a
to you.
second. Go ahead. Hey, Deb, come here.
Well, I'll give it to you later when we're not videotaping. Is what I'm saying.
Oh, okay, that's
Yeah,
fine.
I'll give it to
That's
you afterwards. Yeah. But anyway, so you got this course
yeah. Come
and
here.
started working. Isn't the Bruno course also a course that you could taught you how to build your own like bench or something like that also?
Yes, yes, yes. That was the other interesting thing about it. It had schematics in there uh, to get rid of squats, build squat stands. It was the lowest bench I ever saw in my life. It was only like 8 inches off the ground.
Okay.
But if you had any carpentry to you, and again, this was like the 1960s, and a lot more guys did have skills at that. It was like
So
eight
did you
inches
build the
off.
stuff? Did you build any of the
I
equipment?
got the next door neighbor who had some carpentry skills, who's an older gentleman. He built it for me.
Nice.
And then the squat stands were, like cross feet, and but it was one height. They couldn't adjust them,
Hmm.
so you kind of had to build them to suit you.
Yeah.
But anyway, had these in it, had these calisthenic movements in it. It had very small, like, go ahead, do a little running, but don't get nuts. That was it was the most sensible bodybuilding course I ever saw. It was like 6 barbell exercises that covered everything. And then they had some on alternate days you could do the Hindu push-ups and the
Hmm.
Hindu squats for reps, high reps,
Sure,
build up the
sure.
reps, that kind of thing. He talked about isometrics very quickly in this. That's just that there was no real hardcore push on anything. It was just a very well balanced course. Best course I ever saw for a teenage boy. I know that the teenage boys would look at it now and think, oh God, that's old.
Yeah.
The
No,
other
no.
thing that was interesting about it was, to me, he didn't show with an Olympic barbell. He showed with a standard barbell that most of us could afford. Like I say, at those times, a lot of people couldn't afford that. But he showed with a regular standard barbell and told you could get them at sporting goods stores and things like that. It very much related to a guy, like I say, a 14-year-old boy who has a limited budget.
Yeah.
And of course, I went to my parents and said, I think I like to have a barbell. And they wanted to have my head examined. Although I had an older cousin who had been into Olympic lifting. But finally they said, if you get enough money, which I think at the time was about $25 for this 110-pound set, all right, we'll let you get it. I think they thought I'd never stopped playing baseball long enough to like mow some yards, pull some weeds, things like that to get the money. And I did. And I went to them, I got the money, and you can sort of tell, like, they looked at each other, the damn kid has us. And, so I
Where'd
went
you
and got,
which set was it and where'd you get it from?
okay, it was a York Barbell, but I
Okay.
bought it at a hardware store here in Red Line
Hmm.
on West West Broadway, East Broadway. We had 2 or 3 of them. And I walked in there, and of course now I lived out here in the agrarian area, and I had buddies. If we wanted to play baseball, they had their parents had farms, and so I helped them bale hay and stuff like that. So I might have been a little stronger than the average kid.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, they used to come with those 110-pound sets came with a bar in a paper tube and about 90 pounds worth of collars and dumbbell bars and plates in a box. Well, some old guy was there at the hardware store. Well, I don't know if I can, let me go see if I can find a two-wheel dolly. Well, I picked it up and the box and took it. And then my dad said, I'll take the bar. So I didn't put it in the car. Now, one of the people, there was a lady that worked at this store who lived across the street from one of my aunts. She was telling me, the kid just picked it up, walked out of these two guys, just looked at him. Yeah. So, anyway, but
and you were like 12 years old, somewhere around there?
Yeah, 12, 13, something like that.
Yeah.
And like I said, I was fairly active as a kid, and we played sports and games and, stuff like, and sometimes we did some work so our buddies could, we could all play together.
Did it come with, York sold for years like a Big Ten set that came with like a wrist roller and iron boots and a neck
Didn't
strap?
have that. This was just a 110-pound set. Straight.
Okay.
I had no vision. I had no idea who York Barbell was at that point. I found out later, after World War II, my dad delivered dry cleaning to Bob Hoffman and John Turpe. He never told me that. Well, he told me when I was like 55 years old.
Yeah.
He didn't want me to know. He didn't really want me doing this. He figured I'd hurt myself.
Yeah.
The other thing they thought was, well, he'll do this for about 2 weeks and then he'll want to do something else.
Yeah.
Which is, kid. And fortunately for them, fortunately for me, I stuck with it. Really stuck with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, it's
so what time did you transition from being interested mostly in wrestlers to also weightlifting? And did you visit York Barbell when you started getting into it as a teenager?
A little later, I wanted to get a couple of extra barbell plates, and they didn't have them at the hardware stores. I mean, nothing bigger than the 110-pound set. And I wanted to get, I think, a set of 50s. So I talked my dad into taking me to York Barbell and buying them. I bought them from Steve Stanko.
Did you know who he was one time when you bought it? Were you already into the magazine?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I just look this guy's got arms and everything. Yeah. Anyhow, no, I don't think I knew who he was. Now I met him later, late in his life when he was not in good health. It was kind of sad. In fact, somebody who was that strong at one time to get reduced to what he got reduced to, and he wasn't all that old, is just sad.
What was it? Like they would say it was like phlebitis or something, but what was like the
he had deep. They call it deep-seated phlebitis.
Yeah.
And it was throughout his body.
Yeah.
Grimek told me he went with Steve to like the Mayo Clinic, and maybe there was one in Philadelphia he went to. He said the Mayo Clinic doctors took me aside and said, your friend's not going to live to be 40. Well, Stanko lived to be 59, but I'm telling you, the last, I don't know, several 10 years of his life was horrible. Just horrible.
Yeah. Did Grimek tell you any besides his health? Did he tell you any interesting stories about Stanko? Because they were good friends, right?
Oh yeah. I'll tell you, I learned more about Stanko like 15 years ago or so. They were selling his house in East York. Well, like I say, his wife survived him. She lived with somebody else, and they were. We met a friend of mine, Mike LaCondra, locally, and I went in there. We took out some of the things in his house, some memorabilia stuff, weights, things like that. His personal slant board. He had some cables, no cables from. I think they were used in the ad.
I was about to say, I think he's in the ads for the cables. Yeah.
Yes. Well, and the barber strap cables, those kind of cables. He had some of those, and I think, I don't know, I'm guessing, I think I'm correct. Stanko's cable that he used, that barbershop cable that they got from No originally, was one I took out of there. So, like I say, he had a number of things.
When you say barber strap, you mean like the rubber as opposed
Strap,
to the
rubber strap.
rubbers, yeah, as opposed to
Yeah,
the
just not
coils.
right,
Yeah,
not coils, man,
yeah,
just a strap, big thick strap.
yeah, yeah. Sure, I have some of those. Yeah.
Yes, he did. In fact, he had a complete set of them, and it was interesting to see the different thicknesses. Uh, the I'm telling you that the thickest one, you had trouble deadlifting that thing.
Yeah, I
I think
actually have
Steve,
a few of the different thicknesses hanging in my
yeah,
office gym over there. Maybe I'll take a picture direct and put it up for this
I
conversation.
think I read one time where Steve Klasanin from Pittsburgh, the Mr. America, was the only guy they ever saw who could back press that heaviest cable,
Hmm.
the strap cable.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if Stanko and Grimek were just not saying they did it, or and maybe they couldn't. Who knows?
That
But
was, yeah, it's not something you saw them as many. I mean, you saw them like in their courses and stuff, but besides that, you in a few articles and strength and health, but you didn't see a lot of photos with cables or strands as they call them. Or, but
true.
yeah,
I,
a few months ago, also you were talking about Stanko memorabilia. Maybe it was last year, I don't remember, but sometime fairly recently on one of those Facebook groups, there was someone went behind the scenes at York and they had his old locker, like his
yeah,
Stanko's wooden locker there.
yeah, yeah. They have that on display there, and the bench that Tommy Kono sat on in that big picture that's in the lobby of
Yeah, I remember the bench being out. Yeah,
him and Shepard, and I think Clyde Emmerich.
yeah.
And anyway, but I learned a lot about Stanko when we started going through his stuff. Stanko was a tremendous athlete in high school. He was captain of the football team, the basketball team, and the baseball team. Not just on them, he was the captain. And I don't know. Grimek told me that they suspect the phlebitis thing started with him when he played football. He got kicked.
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm just again
Yeah,
telling you
yeah,
what I
yeah.
was told. But there's no question he had the phlebitis thing bad, and so bad, in fact, that it took him out at about age 26. I mean, so he had like at least 5 more good years
Yeah,
of championship Olympic lifting.
yeah.
Spent that whole summer in bed, so I was told, and had lost a lot of weight. So, but came back to do the bodybuilding thing, and which started out just as him training with the other guys in the gym, and then he
Full
he
version
got
of it.
yeah, he started to develop, well, especially the upper body.
Yeah.
The legs, I'll be honest with you, the legs never quite got to match the upper body.
Yeah, there was always a controversy and different stories you hear about, what was it, the 40, I don't remember what it was, 46, something like that. Or no, it
Yeah,
was first Mr. Universe, so 48, is it? Or anyway,
yeah,
just you hear the different stories about, oh, maybe they turned off the lights when they let him on stage, and they said that's not true.
Dan Laurie's the source of that.
Yeah.
I heard Grimek and Dan Laurie I heard Grimek's side of the conversation, shouting match with Laurie one time when we were still down in Ridge Avenue. Um, Grimek told me, I think this contest was in Chattanooga, I think. It's Tennessee somewhere. He said the car broke down and they had to push. And he said Stanko was out there pushing too the day before. Yeah, I don't know. Obviously this is before I was born. I
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah, yeah.
there. Grimek would have taken Stanko's side in a heartbeat.
Of course.
Um, Lurie was always close. In fact, when Frank Light won in 1942, again,
Hmm.
I'm getting this from Grimek, he said it came down, the pose down came between Laurie and Frank Light.
Yeah.
And he said the judges were having a hard time figuring out who they wanted. So he said there's at least three, okay, this is it. This is the pose down. And they still couldn't decide. Finally, for who the head judge was, said, okay, each of you do your best pose, whatever you think that is.
Yeah.
Well, Laurie got over in his most muscular crab pose. And of course, he's a short guy anyway. And Frank Light was tall, and he stood up and did a really nice lat pose. That swung it to Frank Light. Grimek said if Laurie would have done most anything but that bent over crab pose, he'd have won. I don't know. I wasn't there.
Yeah, I mean, Laurie was kind of talking about that for years. Uncrowned Mr. America, most muscular man in America. He was for a few different
Well,
years. Yeah.
he did well with his SEAL
Yeah,
test stuff. I've seen some of those clips, and it's not like he got totally lost out completely. He also claims that he was the brainchild of the IFBB and Weider
yeah,
stole it.
yeah.
Danny Walters claims he did the bylaws of the IFBB and was the first guy to come up with the idea of Flex magazine. Again,
Yeah, I know it's hard to say. Yeah, these are
yeah,
just stories they're
yeah,
telling at this point. But
right.
yeah, I mean, he was also famous for his high reps. Like he kind of was a Jack LaLanne in that way, and that he did
Yeah,
hundreds
yeah.
and hundreds of dips and all types of things like that.
Well, again,
During,
some of them didn't have weights. They had to go out in the playground and
yeah,
chins and dips. That's what it was. So no, Lori had an excellent physique, and like I
yeah.
said, did well with the SEAL test stuff. Um, I was around him a couple of times in the middle 1980s.
Mm.
But anyway, I probably got off the
Yeah,
track
let's go
here.
back. So you were a teenager, you got your weights, and then I asked kind of when you started getting into maybe more weightlifting or bodybuilding in
Mhm.
high school. And
Well, I started when
did
I
you
went to
wrestle?
look at these pulp wrestling magazines. I started looking at the bodybuilding magazines. Uh, so I wanted, like I said, I started doing the weights. I got the neighbor to make a bench and some squat stands and started doing that. Um, well, yeah, in school, we didn't have a wrestling team when I was
Okay.
first started. Ninth or 10th grade didn't have it. And I didn't I did throw the shot put in high school.
Okay.
Again, but I enjoyed the weightlifting thing. I really did. Yeah, I think it was like demonstrative to me. Okay, when you're 14, 15 years old, and they raise 14 and 15-year-olds differently now. In those days, you were kind of like, you can't, you're not really adept at anything. You haven't proven anything yet. Stuff like that.
Hmm.
Uh, that was the sort of the mindset. Anyway, I could see me getting stronger. And I found out when I was 58 years old, my dad what really worried him was I would get strong and get unruly.
Hmm.
Yes. Now I never was like that, but he was a little concerned that I would be difficult to handle. Uh, but anyway, like I said, I pursued this, and
Did you start
uh,
competing at any point? I know you competed at some point, but was that later in life, or when did you start?
later in life, I did some bench press and deadlift contests. I was mediocre. Okay. I was good at pulling stuff. I could do chins for a heavy guy. I could do chins well. I could deadlift well. I did some Olympic stuff, but I sucked at everything else. I did get to squat 400 pounds. I mean, good squats, not, high
Hmm.
things. I could do 405 for several reps, but that's also about the time Grimek retired from muscular development, and I had to take over. And I was working, well, 60, 70 hours a week to get the magazine. It was done a lot differently then.
Yeah, we're skipping ahead a little bit. Let's go back. So
All right.
you went to high school and you did some college, then you were working at a cookie factory. Is that correct? Or
Yeah, I worked at Stauffer Biscuit here locally. Um, I would run down to York Barbell every other Wednesday. This is how I got hired there.
yeah.
One of Bob's girlfriends worked the snack bar every other Wednesday. One of his
What was
former
her
girls,
name?
Ruth Snellbaker.
Okay.
And anyway, she was there. And one day I walked in, and she said, "Yeah, she was like her. She thought she actually was the personnel director." Anyway, she started saying to me about, well, Mark Cameron was leaving, and by the way, Mark is alive. I'm not the last person to work at York Barbell office.
Oh, you
Uh,
did right. I misspoke. That's right. Yeah,
yeah, well, that's
yeah,
fine.
yeah,
Mark will be upset, but anyway. Uh, so she said, Mark, this is like before the '76 Olympics. Mark had made a deal with them, like, I'll come work for a year, train there, work in the magazine. And this was in the summer, so it wasn't too far away from him leaving. And she said, "Oh, we're going to go down and man the magazine, and Grimek's trying to find somebody, and so on and so forth." And I said, "Well, probably be no problem." I said, "There's tons of guys and girls that have journalistic experience of some sort. shouldn't be too hard to find. She said, I'll tell Grimek. And I thought, well, that'll last till I get out the door. And darned if she didn't. So 2 weeks after, she's back again, and I walked in, and I got into the Bridge Avenue, and there was a long foyer there. I didn't more than get in the door, and she hollers at me, Grimek's looking for you. Okay, and she told me how to get in touch with him. And I did.
You know, from your visits, just coming and going to the snack bar, did Grimek know who you were? Just like
No.
you talked to him?
No.
Okay.
Well, actually, I was told, I called him up and he said, well, I'm going to be done training about 4:45. Can you come down the side door? I'll let you in. So anyway, I got in, and he takes me upstairs, and he's telling me, look, what we need is somebody to do these Hoffman articles, which were god awful. Original copy of Hoffman's at any stage of his life. Well, redundant, beyond redundant, redundant to the 52nd power. Anyway, somebody always cleaned these things up.
Yeah.
And I don't care if you even go back to his books in the 30s, and somebody was cleaning them up. Supposedly it was Rosetta. Anyway, Grimek gave me a stack of these Hoffman articles. Nobody wanted to do them. That's what it comes down to. And he gave me literally a ream of typing paper. Here, go see what you can make out of these.
Were these something they've been written like a decade previously? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, but Bob was doing nothing new by this time.
Yeah. And what was this, 1976, 78? 76?
76.
Okay.
Summer of 76. Anyhow, so I went home, and, I'm still like, I don't know, how much liberties can I take with this stuff? So I did an article. I did a couple of them, actually. And took them back, and Grimek read them and said, well, you're okay with me. He said, now you got to talk to Turpak. So I made an appointment to see Turpak. And this was an odd interview. The first thing he wanted to know is, where do you live? Because he said, we've had all these other guys who on the magazine who live, miles back from the main roads. And if it snowed, they couldn't get out for a week. And that was Tom Suggs. Tom Suggs had a farm that was way, way back. And I also found out Turpak was nursing a grudge for the Star Suggs era, those guys in particular.
Gotcha.
Because first thing he told me, one of the first things he said to me is, how well do you know Grimek? I said, well, just what I read in magazines and stuff. And he said, well, I'm going to put you in an office with Grimek. Then he sits there, and he kind of just starts looking around the room and says to me, look, Grimek's bark is a lot worse than his bite. And I'm thinking, oh, good, the old guy goes mad, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And also, you got to remember that, or listeners got to remember, you're 25 years old. You're 20. You're young 20, man. Have no experience in this, really.
And Grimek is who he is, and I'm at York Barbell, and I. Okay, he also told me, he said, I don't want any more of these damn lifters. He said, I had enough. I knew who he was referring to, Starr and Suggs and Terry Todd and that crowd. He said, they go down and train at lunch. They come back at 2. They work another hour, and then they're back training again. He said, he had problems with them. Let's just put it that way. I'm sure documented by now. Ironically, he said, if you want to go down and train in the gym, after work, fine. I don't care. So I'm down there training. After I worked there 4 months or something like that, one day he's walking through. He looked at me and said, when are you going to compete in something? I thought you didn't want me to. Anyway, he was serious. Speaking
of Turpak, I've heard over the years, you read a lot of Grimek stories, and everyone loves Grimek, and I love your stories. Do you have any Turpak stories? He ever tell you about when he competed in the Olympics or anything like that? Was he not as talking?
Well, the one thing I remember is when he, shall we say, retired. I forget which Olympics it was at. It must be 1948. Coming back on the boat, and he said, I was going to retire. And he said, because I wanted to get into the business of York Barbell, the actual management. He said, somebody I forget who he told me was on the team that said, "Oh, you're not going to retire." He said, "Yeah, I am." He said, "I took my gym bag, put my lifting belt around it, and I threw it in the ocean." He said, "I'm retired." That's one Turpak story.
I always get Turpak and Chilazzo mixed up, to be honest, in my head. I know one of them won the national champion, I think. Was it one champ? I know it was like a decade apart. Was it Turpak?
Turpak won his class at the senior nationals for quite a number of years.
Okay.
Oh, he also told me as he started there at York Barbell packing weights. That's what he did all day, packed weights in boxes. And Grimek always said, the best lifting he ever did was when he was packing weights. He said then he got into management, and But anyway, he's okay. That people don't know this about the York gym on not Ridge Avenue, on Broad Street. Broad Street. It was hot. There was no heat, and you died up there in the summer. There was no air conditioning. Grimek said we almost never trained. This is, I think, one reason why they always held the senior national weightlifting championships in like May. They didn't want to get into the heat of the summer. He said, we either didn't train or we'd walk up there and do some presses and go home. Turpak told me, he said, he didn't train but 6 weeks before a major lifting contest. He said, I reached a point where 6 weeks of training, I could do 250, 325 and win. Wow. He said, when it got to the point I was doing that and was in danger of losing, he said, that's it. I'm done. So
that's pretty.
They didn't, it wasn't like now where there's fierce, adherence to the gym, Now, some of them trained harder than others. But that was one thing I always found interesting about Turpak. He said, I reached a point where I could do 6 weeks of training, could do 250, 250, 325 and win.
He was a great lifter. Did you ever go to Broad Street? I mean, you've been there. Did you ever go up in the Broad Street? Bill, because you were already at Ridge Avenue. So what was it going? Was it anything at Broad Street at that time? Or
yes, it was a mess. It was a place time forgot. In fact, in the late, let me think when this was, 1980s. Phil Redmond, our advertising manager, was a collector, new collectors and stuff, got the okay to go up there and clean out the place. And we found all kinds of stuff, particularly photographic pictures from even back to Strength Magazine. One of the interesting things we found, in addition to like the first All-Star baseball game and things like that, they found national traveling teams from Japan, China, and Hawaii.
You like photos of them, you mean?
Huh?
You found photos of these things you're talking about?
Yes, team photos.
Yeah.
Of from Major League Baseball from 1901, 2, 3, somewhere in that range. We sent them off to the Hall of Fame up in Cooperstown, and they wrote back and said, "Where did you find these things? We have newspaper reports that these games were played, but we have no visual evidence that there were any of these teams ever exist." So we found stuff like that. We also found an entire case of those Herman Gorner books. His autobiography by
Mueller.
Mueller. Yeah. So we were the source of those for a while. We were selling some off, and I kept a couple, and but we were selling them off. Phil was mostly. So we found them. And I came away with a couple of artifacts from the gym up there.
Oh, yeah?
I had 2 40-pound solid dumbbells. These things were cast handles, not, a steel bar through them. They're cast handles. And I strongly suspect, and I found out later, they did come from Canada. There was a guy up there in the late 30s who also had a York, Canada situation named Norm Miller. We think he had them made up there. I ended up selling those to somebody.
I actually remember those because when you took me on a tour, you had them in your trunk after you showed them to me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't my first injury, but I lifted them over my head for a picture. And as I did that, I felt my lower back tweak, which I already had a tweak, but I didn't tell you guys. But the
Yeah.
whole drive home, I was in a
You're
lot of
certain.
pain. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I probably have that picture. I can probably put it up somewhere.
yeah.
You say they're
I
cast, you mean they're one piece, because most York things you have the
yeah.
buns or the heads, and you have
Well,
a
the head's
handle that
embedded
goes
on
into
the
it.
handle. This was
Yes.
the cast handle,
Yes.
and it was a little thicker.
Yes.
And I always liked, when I gave tours, I always like to bring along something additionally.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I sold them to somebody later who just pestered me to death for them. Trying to think what else we found up there. 'Cause I found other
On
things.
that same tour, after you dropped us off, I went and drove to Broad Street just to go look at the outside, and I took photos of it. And it's all, the neighborhood was all run down around it, and
Yeah,
and you can kind of still see the York lettering on top a little bit. And I remember like getting out of the car, and like I could tell, like people on the stoop, like all across the street, like, what is this
yeah.
guy doing? I'm like taking selfies of myself with this rundown building.
Uh,
And I always regret that. I was like, I should have, I don't know, broken a window and gone inside or something.
well, the building would have fallen down around you. They
Yeah,
finally did have, the
I
city
know.
required them to take it down. It was a hazard.
Yeah, I have one of the bricks right over here, actually.
Yeah, they were selling bricks.
Yeah, this was before I got it. So it was actually, I think it was actually Carl Lineach's idea to steal the bricks
Mhm.
before, and then Dave Hartnett stole him one. And I was like, oh, I should have gotten one when I was there. And then
There's plenty
I
laying
think Dave,
around.
someone sent it to me, and then they started selling them after that. So this is
Yeah, yeah. No, I'd been upstairs. I'll tell you one story about the upstairs, and because Grimek told me this stuff, and then the use where the steps went down, that used to be the locker room.
okay.
And this was, we're back in the 1940s here. Well, actually, it was the 1950s. One Saturday, Sig Klein and Frank Light came down to train, and with Grimek and maybe Stanko, and they were training, and they got showered and left, and they were going down the steps, and Klein said to Frank Light, "Great atmosphere. What do you think of the place?" That's what he said. "What do you think of the place?" Frank said, "Great atmosphere, but what a shit house." And Grimek said, "I was standing on the other side of the wall and heard that." He said, "And I walked out and looked at the place like, well, maybe, he's, because Grimek, that was his training home. He thought
Yeah.
there was nothing wrong. Well, maybe I'm wrong." So anyway, he told me, he said he got the chance. He said he lobbied with Bob about, maybe we should get a nicer gym,
Yeah.
nicer. And he said it sort of came to a head about 1957. He and I guess it was Vern Weaver and maybe one other person were in the car with Bob, and they were driving to Paris Island for an exhibition. And Grimek said, "I lobbied with Bob the whole way down and the whole way back for this new facility." And he says, "Wonder Bob didn't throw me out in South Carolina and make me walk." But he said eventually they bought what had been an Acme. It had been an old Acme store. That's what had been at Ridge Avenue before. And he said, so they put in this gym, and Grimek said, it was nice. It had that nice institutional look. It was bright. It was shiny. It was just like this. He said, "I walked over and looked at the place and trained there one time. I didn't like it."
Yeah.
He said, "I hated it." He said, "I snuck back at nights without Bob knowing to train on Broad Street." He said, they weren't quick in taking equipment out. He said, so I could work out there. But he said, a few months went by and everything was gone. I had to go back over there. But he said, as much ruckus as I raised with Bob about getting a new place, and I didn't like it. So, but he said he finally, got accustomed, and because he didn't have a choice. And that's, geez, I was going to say,
let's go
you
back.
asked.
Yeah, let's go back to so you become the editor for muscular development, and you were writing. Was it were you continuously writing articles under Bob Hoffman's name, or were you editing more, or doing both, or?
Did a little of both. First, all they wanted me to do is just anything under Bob's byline in both magazines. Mm-hmm. And after a while, I thought, well, why not? So I started reading copy and editing copy, and Um, Geez, I don't know. I did write one or two things under my own byline. I wrote one thing one time under my brother-in-law's byline, and I don't remember if that's when I was editor or not. Probably. Anyway, the other thing that occurred around early 1980 was John Turpak Jr. got out of the Marines and came to work there, and he wanted to go and do more shows, national strength and conditioning shows,
Sell equipment.
fitness. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so he and I were going around, not every weekend by any means, but here and there to shows, fitness clinics. We did a couple of, strength clinics, things like football clinics, things like that, here and there. So I was out on the road repping for York Barbell some. And that continued on. I guess I think I stopped doing that about the time I became editor of MD when Grimek left.
Talk to me about the equipment. And so you're obviously repping, so you knew details of the equipment because you're selling it to people. So what, people, so many York collectors nowadays, and they know the different bars and how it changed from the 30s to 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Who made the changes? Who designed them? There's a rumor, the story is the first one was copied for the Berg barbell that Steinmore.
Yeah.
But from that point on, who knew how to design barbells?
Well, one thing was, if you wanted to be, international weightlifting got really organized and rules oriented, particularly with regards to the equipment. So, bars had to be made of this and had to have this much flexion and this kind of knurling and, so on and so forth. I think that started a lot of it. And I'm guessing that because sometimes some of the bars had center knurling on it, which would have gone back to the one-arm lifting days. Some of them don't. Most of them don't.
Yeah.
Because guys used to scrape up their throat when they cleaned. Anyhow, I think the changes in international weightlifting rules probably had a lot to do with that.
In the 19, so when you started there in 76, were they still using York barbells for international, or were the other companies already taking over from that?
That York was being used some, but here was the thing. The IWF got in control of one guy, and he was taking, I'll call it bribes. They said, you have to donate so many sets and you have to have other requirements to be a class A barbell or if you weren't, you were a class B barbell. Well, they really didn't, endorse, recommend, condone having a class B barbell. You were basically in no man's land.
Yeah.
And Turpak said to the IWF, this one guy in particular, all right, print these rules. They had an IWF weightlifting magazine. Print these rules and requirements. Never did it. Wouldn't do it. So Turpak and Joseph Schnell from West Germany sort of formed the guy was Thomas Ion, block.
Okay.
And they, of course, here is the thing. So they did keep, because we would get requests from various countries of the Caribbean or Pan American or this, that, and the other thing about having a national championship and getting a York barbell. And then they would always say, are you a class A barbell or not? Well, technically we weren't, because we weren't paying the homage.
Yeah.
So we lost some stuff there. But in 1984, Turpak pulled a coup. He got the staged, well, there was always a backstage room barbell, and then there's the one on the platform.
Yeah.
He got the York barbell on the platform because of being involved with the U.S. Olympic Committee, who then eventually got to know Peter Uberoth and played the political game, is the point. Which this fired up LECO for one, because they were paying off in sets and stuff like that. They got angry with Ion, and Ion said it won't happen again. Well, we started having record makers here in this country somewhere along there too, and York Barbell was used. Turpak and Schnell were giving him a run for their money without paying him money, you know.
Yeah.
So they basically, what you did is you gave the IWF was 30 or 40 sets a year, and he would distribute them to these small countries like they were coming from the IWF.
Yeah, I see.
That kind of thing. And then there was also cash involved.
Yeah.
And then the drug testing thing started. And the first drug test, the urine was sealed hermetically and all that, but he was carrying them around because he went from wherever that was to Las Vegas to record makers to somewhere else. He was carrying those things around for at least a month until if they even got tested at all.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of stuff that was, going on behind the scenes. And
this day, stuff like that's still going on. I mean, the past few years, there's been a ton of scandals.
Yeah. But anyway, that's the equipment. Okay, now there's the equipment, the barbells. There's the equipment, the other stuff, which was woefully behind the times. I'm not telling anybody.
They were using the same equipment, the same ads from 1940 and 1970s.
Let me tell you what happened in Muscular Development magazine. Grimek would cut the ads out of one magazine. Let's say it was on page 40.
Yeah.
It was being the next issue on somewhere between 38 and 42, and the rest of them are almost like that. It was the same ads. It was the same stuff. Now, Turpak did make an overture to Joseph Schnell in the late 1970s. Schnell had all these gearbox machines. They were usually antagonistic principle, biceps, triceps, chest, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they worked in gearbox theory. It was not simple gearbox reduction, but it was they were pretty good. Let's put it that way. And I know they wanted to. Turpak wanted to, and his son wanted to have something where we actually had some equipment.
Machines, yeah.
In the machine age.
Yeah.
Well, there was another party inside York Barbell, not named Hoffman, who scotched that pretty good. And fortunately, Turpak was not the really aggressive kind. It just sort of went by the wayside. There was a lot of things that occurred at York Barbell.
I know you've told me, and you've shared on Iron History, how basically, as Hoffman was declining, there was really almost an anti-growth mentality that because Dietz and them didn't want to make the money. They didn't want to pay taxes on it when Hoffman passed away, and they thought he was going to pass away sooner. So then there was this huge decline of no pushing forward. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's kind of what I remember reading.
No, that's basically it. They were stalling orders to go out. It was like we don't want to make more money. One individual in the company thought Bob was going to die long before he did.
Yeah.
First of all, from auto accidents. And Bob survived those. And okay, it was the company was run like a third world army. We had a general.
You had a general. Oh yeah.
And when the general got incapacitated, everything stopped.
Yeah.
It was just like that. The more Bob got out of the company, the more things slowed down.
What was your interaction with? And obviously, so everyone talks about their 70s. He started kind of getting Alzheimer's, dementia, and what was your interaction with Bob Hoffman?
Hello, Bob. That was about it. Turpak pointed out, he said, "That's the guy that's your ghostwriter." Oh, well, he's a very nice fellow. Just all right, I'll tell you this about York Barbell. I saw this the first year I was there. Bob would sign stuff. Papers were put in front of him, not by Turpak. He would sign stuff. He had two sets of, let's say, different papers. He'd sign one and halfway through sign the other. Well, what am I signing? Well, you could tell him anything. You could have told him anything, and he'd have signed it. I was sitting across from him at the Christmas party, and I'm watching this go on. And then, like I said, I knew people. He was starting to have mental slides. Boy, he didn't recognize Doc Tilney in 1976. Turpak was with him at a food show in Washington, D.C. And Tilney came in and started talking to them. And Tilney had a very high nasal voice. Turpak said if you heard it once, you'd have known who it was.
You wrote all the nutrition articles, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Frederick Tilney.
Yeah. His name was on for years. Yeah.
Weider was the same way, by the way. Had a high nasal voice, and if you heard it once, you knew it was him.
Yeah.
I had that encounter at 1986 at the Columbus airport. Guy behind me, I heard the voice. Oh, that can't be Weider. I turned on. It was Joe Weider. Anyway, it was
quick thing on Weider. You mentioned somewhere you wrote also. You said you saw when, I don't know if you saw it, but maybe you're just aware of it. The last time that Weider and Hoffman bumped into each other.
It was 1978 in St. Louis.
What happened?
I think George Turner's. I don't think Bob recognized him. I really don't. They came face to face in a restaurant, and I don't think Bob recognized him. There was tons of people sitting in there from the Iron Game, and everybody was just like up on their seat waiting to see what would happen. Nothing. I'm sure Weider recognized him.
Yeah.
And I think just basically said hello, and Bob said hello and kept right on going. So we were all a little disappointed.
Yeah.
But no,
they were not friends. They were not friends.
Oh, yeah, that's an understatement.
Yeah. I was just saying, there's an interview of Weider. He must have been close to 90. It was done. His name slips my. I think it was done by Leroy Colbert. Colbert was interviewing him on YouTube. It was just like a YouTube thing. They're in the backyard. You can barely hear it, but I've listened to it, and I forget how Bob Hoffman came up, but Weider goes, "He was a son of a bitch." That's what he said.
Well, you could find people in the non-Weider camp that would tell you that at moments too.
Yeah. I know. Yeah.
But then again, Bob never stranded anybody in Montreal like Joe did repeatedly. He'd give them one-way plane tickets to come to California and, come to Montreal from California. And then, of course, they thought he'd give them a plane ticket home. Well, after about 3-4 weeks, when he had them doing exhibitions in gyms and, stuff like that. I know this because Jack LaLanne got a one-way plane ticket once. Yeah. Grimek said he called me up and said, "John, should I take this?" And he had stranded other people. And Grimek said, "Jack, I wouldn't do this." And Jack didn't do it. Now, I'll tell you who did twice. Armin Tanny.
Oh, yeah.
Armin Tanny got stranded up there twice. And I tell you that because I heard it come out of Vic Tanny's mouth. Late in his life, Vic Tanny stopped by York Barbell a couple of times. He was traveling the country.
Vic Tanny just like, it's even on eBay right now. Just someone found his lock, or what do they call it? Like the locker, the storage locker, his ex-wife's storage locker. And just a ton of rare photos from 30s on, like from him at childhood. It's like family. I mean, it's physique photos also, but family photos all the way through. I brought a few of them, but it's really kind of sad that it ended up in his locker room now. Just his family.
Well, I get that. In fact, I had a number of things. I'm going to say between 10 years ago, and I took a look around, and I thought, well, I don't have any kids. Why am I hanging on to this?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. And I don't know. I just started selling it off. I never, put it on eBay or anything like that. I had a pair. Did you ever see those sandals Grimek wore at the all those early Bob Huffman birthday shows when he got spray painted and
I've seen the spray paint, and I can picture him in iron boots, but I can't think of them as sandals.
No, they're sandals.
Yeah,
they were. I sold them to Reuben Weaver.
I kind of image in my head. Yeah.
Well, I sold them to Reuben Weaver the day before one of the AOBS dinners.
Uh-huh.
Well, I don't know. This 20 years. How long has Reuben been dead? Might be 25 years ago. 30 years ago.
That Reuben was passed in 2015 or something like that.
Well, I'm just saying it might have been that far back.
I didn't
give them to him. I sold them to him. and gave him a letter that, yeah, this is, well, anyway, when we moved out of Broad Street, excuse me, out of Ridge Avenue, Grimek was not a happy camper. He, had come to, that was his office. The gym was downstairs. And this is a change. And he was firing. He threw the Weaver stick into a trash can. He threw his sandals into the trash can. He was just firing stuff. He wasn't happy. And I asked him, I said, I don't know, even at that point, it'd have been much better if I'd have had my current knowledge of iron history and stuff like that back around 1978. I didn't. I asked him, I said, can I fish your sandals out of the trash can? Why? What do you want them for? I said, well, they were yours. All right, just he did. I come to
What was he
realize.
mad about? I missed what he was mad about.
Oh, having to move. We were getting moved up
Oh, so you're
to
just getting rid of his.
83.
Yeah.
We were getting moved up to Interstate 83. Sorry, I knew all this stuff, so I'm starting to talk like him. He was very cryptic. It's just you did these stories so many times, and you start omitting things.
So he had his Weaver stick there, just a stick, really, with patches on it, but
boom in the trash can. Then he picked up the sandals and boom, and there's other stuff he was throwing out.
I remember you told me a story where you guys threw out just reams of Hoffman's paper.
Oh, that was another.
Yeah, that's what he told me years ago. I was like, oh, for a collector,
yeah, no, they had me go up to Bob's house. Geez, this had been 1977, I guess, maybe early 78. He gave me the van and he said, go up to Aldo wants this stuff, all these old manuscripts and stuff. Get rid of them. Well, we went through the ones that were on the shelves. She gave me a big Samsonite luggage case, and we filled that stuff up. And then the housekeeper crawled under a bed and said, oh, there's more of it under here. So then we got a case of club sandwiches, just the box, and filled that thing up. And I think that was it for that time. Paola wanted to stuff out. She wanted out bad. She gave me that Samsonite box, which was big.
So did you throw it? You just threw it away?
Well, I was told, and they said, when you bring it back to her, I said, just heave them in the dumpster. Okay. Yeah. And I did that. And then I, parked the van, went back up to the office. And Grimek said, what'd you do with the stuff, Hoffman's stuff? I said, I threw it in the dumpster like I was told. I don't want to know. This was Bob's company, thought, word, and deed. I mean, it was just, we don't know anything. It's just Bob's company. Now, that's like guys like Grimek.
So is that what Grimek? So was Grimek? He knew Hoffman for so long. Were they before? His dementia and everything. Were they friends? Were they considered?
Yeah. Well, I mean, John had 3 girls. Then he had 3 boys. The first one was named Bob. The second was named Steve. The one that came on behind was named John Jr.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, so he was all into York. He loved York. So what did he ever talk about? Like, for years, you heard rumors about what happened when Bob Hoffman died and the contest and the will and all that. And then a couple of years ago, John Fair wrote an article that explained a lot of what was going on there. I actually reread that recently. It seemed like Hoffman for decades was probably aware that Mike Dietz was kind of stealing from the company, but also running the company.
What was his level of complicity in that?
Yeah, it seems like he knew of it, yeah. But what was Grimek's thought of that, especially in the later years where, he could see that happening more and he wasn't, Hoffman wasn't really running at that point. What did Grimek think of that? He just didn't care about, he cared about York immensely, but not the business end so much.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. He cared about the magazine. He cared about being employed. Yeah. But that just wasn't him. Yeah. Business side wasn't him. I don't think Stanko had any dissimilar inclination. He was the same way. Now I know they started getting inklings as time went on. Now, and the problem is what we're going to do about it. But one of them was, they printed one time in the York paper, and I don't know, this must have been the 1960s or the very early 70s, all the properties in New York City and who owned them. Well, it came to light that that property on Ridge Avenue was owned by Mike Dietz, which fired up some of them.
Yeah, it
Now,
said it in that.
they knew stuff was going on. They knew stuff was going on. It's like you couldn't put your finger on it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I knew Turpak was a little afraid of Dietz in that he thought, well, I mean, let's be honest, they weren't selling equipment or anything like they had been. Even the magazines, well, we were getting competition, and we weren't really doing much anything different. And I think Grimek was concerned that Dietz would shut down the magazines as Bob got progressively more, disabled mentally or physically.
And that was his job, basically. So yeah,
Huh?
and that was
Yeah,
his
it's his job.
job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now, he was more than old enough to retire, but
Yeah.
I guess this is something he helped build, and he kind of, anyway, they didn't know quite what to do about it. And in 1978, before that, there was a list. Bob's will originally, Bob ran around, and Dave Mayer told me this. Bob ran around in the 1960s telling people that, business people, that when he died, all the weightlifters were going to be millionaires. That's the phrase he used. Well, they were going to get a piece of the business. Turpak showed me the addendum to that will. There was like 19 names on there of people who would benefit.
Yeah.
Grimek was on there, Stanko, Dick Bachtell. Not all these guys were alive at this point. Vern Weaver was on it. Bill March was on it. I think Dick Smith was on it. There were some other guys. Val Vaslov might have been on it, and so might Bill St. John, the bodybuilders. Anyway, that will, and like I said, but this was typed on Bob's typewriter. Bob's typewriter was funky, and it would type and then jump a line and would kind of go this way. And then when you had to bring it back, and it, for some reason, screwed up the margin. So I knew this was it had been on Bob's typewriter. So I'm assuming Bob had done it. Anyway, that got nixed in 1978 when Bob's company lawyers, Dick Budd and John Boddington, told him he shouldn't fragment the company like this.
Yeah.
That would have caused problems for one guy in particular. Anyway.
Same guy. Same to Mike Dietz, right? Because
yeah. Anyhow, they changed the will, and all these guys got cut out.
Yeah.
And and of course, Bob dies in 85, and it's the wills. There was two wills, a corporate estate and a private estate, were on the front page of the York paper. I know Grimek was hurt. He wasn't saying it, but he was hurt because he wasn't mentioned. I don't think he wanted a lot of money. That wasn't Grimek. He wanted to be remembered. His statement was, Bob always preached loyalty. I want to see Bob's loyalty. Well, at this point, the will got changed. Bob was on a lot of medication. Grimek didn't blame Bob so much, but the influence of others.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was also a little miffed at Turpak. Turpak knew the will had been changed and didn't tell him.
Yeah.
That bugged him. But anyway, what made things worse for John, he and his wife went to the local social club. There was a place called the Dutch Club that was at the time. And, they danced. They liked to polka dance and things like that. And anyway, they would go there on weekends. Well, people at this club knew who he was. He had no idea who they were, but they were coming up to him and saying, hey, we were sorry you got hosed, and boy, you deserved better, and things like that.
Yeah.
And it was just really eating at him. And finally, he went to Bill Gustafoulis, the attorney up in Harrisburg, because you really couldn't have gotten a lawyer here in New York that would have been objective, and get it in a Harrisburg court. And contested the will. Now, it's like Dave Mayer told me. He said, well, if John can't break the will, none of us have a shot. So John had to be the first one. But like I said, it hurt him. But he didn't blame Bob because he said, I knew Bob was under heavy medication and things like that. Can I take a bathroom break?
Yeah, sure.
Just let me, I'll be right back.
Okay, I'm going to stop recording here for a second. Paused it. All right. So back around that same time, a few things came up. Was one that people have talked about is when Bob Hoffman died, is the obituary or the articles about him weren't as much as people felt it should have been. Do you remember that time?
Yes, particularly in Strength and Health magazine. We were instructed by Turpak that just put a picture of him there, put a black border around it, and don't make any comments. Bob's life is played out in Strength and Health magazine in particular, and other places to such a degree, you're not going to tell them anything they don't know anyway. So just black border and get off of it. Okay, I suspect from things that Turpak said, little things here and there, and Turpak harbors some resentment for Hoffy on some levels. I can make a guess what one would be, but I think he had some, first of all, he thought Bob was getting worse and worse and worse. He should have either just gone into hiding, so to speak, or been a gracious patron. Show up and look, just sit there, and he wasn't doing that. And that was not Turpak's style. And that bothered him because I think he had to be seen with him and he had to explain him and, so on and so forth. But as far as the corporate dynamic goes, I think Turpak was holding a big grudge against Bob for who he sided with and how often and when and in what circumstance.
So, it was around the same time. So soon after that, Strength and Health ended and Muscular Development was sold, right? To
we kept 1988 Muscular Development was sold to Twin Labs.
Well, 88. Okay, I thought it was 86.
Yeah.
So it was a few more.
No, 86. I think 86 was when the S&H went out.
Yeah.
Should have gone out long before that. And just in terms of sales, I know one guy lost his job because of that. So, I'm not crowing, but anyway, it's just, and he didn't want to do the bodybuilding stuff. So I think he could have stayed if he wanted to. But anyway, they let me go hog wild, so to speak, with MD. They always had that mail order mentality that this was the house organ, and we've got, this is our public face. Well, they let me spend a lot more money and do a lot of things that Grimek would have been afraid to do. Okay, for some reason, Dietz liked me.
So
he knew.
Hold on, let's get it. So Hoffman died, and but less than a year later, Strength and Health closed.
Yeah.
And when did Grimek retire in that mix?
Oh crap! Was it 85? It's 84 or 85.
Oh, so a little before Hoffman died. Then. Yeah.
And I know the S&H was hemorrhaging money. Had been. Oh geez, maybe even back into when he hired me, probably was. There's either you have to put money into it to pep it up, or you don't.
And we already talked about how that wasn't the mentality of the
company. No. The epitaph to let's say York Barbell of the 20th century was catch-22. We don't have enough money to fix things, but we've got enough money to plod along, or it's we'll spend $1 to make $2, but we won't spend $2 to make $5. I mean that it's catch-22. If things are going well, we don't have to spend money.
Yeah.
If things aren't going well, we don't have the money to spend. So that's what I'm saying. Catch-22.
Yeah.
So where was I at here?
You were saying, and then I was saying that they let. So Grimek retired, Strength and Health closed, Hoffman passed away, Strength and Health closed, and then you had more free range with Muscular Development.
Yeah. Like I said, for a while, both magazines were going on one month, one the next. No, actually, I guess I was going on every month and he was going on the off months. But they let me spend a lot more money on a lot of things, and I got a chance to do things that just to make things look better. I mean, I was lucky. I was very lucky. I made friends with Art Zeller at a Rogue Pro show up in Worcester, Massachusetts in 1985, the fall that year. Around that same time, I got to know Russ Warner. I met Russ Warner, in fact, about maybe 7, 8 years earlier, and had a little conversation with him. Got to know his friend, Rosemary Hallam. And they said, well, we could do stuff for you, because I didn't know what to do with the posing platform.
Yeah.
God knows I didn't have this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought, do I keep it or do I throw it out? Well, no other magazine had it. I thought it was a tribute to Grimek. I'm letting it go. I'm keeping it. So anyway, Rosemary Hallam and Russ Warner said, well, we can furnish you a copy and journalistic, photojournalistic stuff for that. Great. So I got the dean of Weider.
Those are amazing contacts. I mean, they're legendary.
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys were Weider's top guys at one time.
Yeah.
And Art Zeller was really leery to deal with me. York did not have a good reputation. Well, they had a reputation for paying. Weider didn't have a reputation. He stiffed people a lot, including Art and Russ. And but York just had the reputation of being cheap. Well, I made friends with Art and did things that some of the articles that Art took the pictures, and I said, well, do a Q&A tape, and I'll make an article from it and put your byline on it. So it's text and photos by Art Zeller. I can pay you a little more. He did that. He loved it. He thought, and I did. I paid him, like for the pictures. And he had a gripe with Weider, one of which was Weider had all these international magazines in Germany and Spain and God knows wherever else. He would pay Art one time to use the transparency of whoever on the cover of his magazines. Mm-hmm. Then he'd give that same transparency to the guy in Germany whose name's escaping me now. And anyway, they passed it around between all these other international magazines in Germany, Spain, Indonesia, wherever they were. And Art only got paid once. Yeah. So that was a burr under Art's saddle. So every time I used something of Art, I made sure he got paid for it. I mean, I went out of my way it made more work for me, and I was just so happy to keep Art in good terms.
I don't have a lot of muscular developments from that time frame. Who were it was a lot of bodybuilding more so, right? I mean, that's how muscular development always was.
Yeah, and a little powerlifting. It was mostly bodybuilding. Yeah, male and female power bodybuilding, excuse me. And Mike Lambert always put a little
and were you still kind of promoting a lot of the AAU stuff, or was it also IFBB? No. Who was
I went I took some heat from this personally, but I told the AAU, yeah, you guys get your act together, because I'm going to start doing, but extreme loyalty to you, singular loyalty to you does not pay. So I had AAU contests and I had NPC contests, even went to 1 or 2 NPC contests, big ones. There were some of those people that were NPC people that told the photographers, some of my photographers, well, I liked him better when he was against us. They didn't like it. I don't know. I do know
the first interviews I did on here was with Mike Graham, who's in Lockhart. I know he was involved in the NPC stuff, I believe, in the early 80s, which a few years before. Did you know Mike Graham at all?
I know of him.
Yeah, we never met him there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so you were kind of expanding out of your people who were more marketable.
Well, just a bigger audience, the NPC people. And the other thing I had going for me, they couldn't say this, but everybody knew it. More of those NPC guys and women that weren't ending up on the cover of Flex or even inside of Flex would end up on the cover of MD or inside an MD. They knew it. I mean, it was they told the photographer, yeah, we know that, we see that, can't
Yeah.
say it, but we see it, you know. And I, like I said, I think we also were the first to put a woman on the magazine. I think, I mean, actual female bodybuilder. I put J.J. Marsh and Laura Creval on it.
You mean on the just on
And,
the cover by themselves? You mean?
yeah, by themselves.
Yeah.
Because you go back far enough. Chris Dickerson was on the cover, but he was on the cover with a white guy from Australia. There was a thing.
I'm
Well,
sorry.
first of all,
What you think it was the first of what? A female on the cover of what?
well, certainly a female on the cover of MD, a
Female
bodybuilder, female.
bodybuilder woman on the
Yeah,
cover.
yeah.
What year do you think that was approximately?
86.
Okay, cool.
Uh, but
And
again, it was the couples. They were a good couple, and they were NPC people. They eventually became pros. Do you want to do the racial thing?
sure.
Okay.
I mean,
Uh,
I don't really want to start. They always talk. Talk. There's always the battle between Weider and Hoffman, who is anti-Semitic and who is racist. And Weider in his movie, they said they put the first, African American on the cover, which wasn't true because Hoffman had,
well, John
John
Davis on long
Davis
before.
and all that. And he
Oh
defended
no,
John
was
Davis also when
yeah,
people wrote in
yeah,
and talked about
yeah.
like how can you put this guy's butt on the cover and.
Oh yeah, that was.
Really?
I was told that was said. Uh, it was odd. Well, we discussed this once before somewhere with somebody. It was that generation didn't look at, because I don't know, nudity, if that's it, quite the same in a bodybuilding context. It was more of like an extension of art.
Yeah.
Well, we mentioned John Terlazzo. John Terlazzo was a very conservative guy, religiously and all that. Posed on the cover of S&H, back when he got out of the service. Well, I think with just the string and a patch.
Yeah, yeah, no, I know the cover. Like 30.
And I mean, and I'm telling you, he was not liberal or for in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, yeah,
They just didn't look at it that way.
yeah. Different times for sure.
So anyway, but okay, you got the race thing there, which I'm glad you pointed out. Weider was not the first person, and they also made an issue of this Weaver being Harold Poole. Harold was more muscular by today's standard. That's true. Vern had been through the AAU mill, had been a lifter. Harold was 19 years old. I think they did not really want a 19-year-old representing them. Yeah, he's black, and that wouldn't play well in some parts of the country. I grant you that. But they sort of seem to have, apparently, copying the Miss America thing where you were actually our representative and we sent you around.
Yeah.
They didn't send them around. That's just. But anyway, Harold was probably, and age was a factor. Yeah, okay, race was a factor. Because again, you look at Melvin Wells. Dave told me Melvin Wells was never going to win, but should have.
Yeah,
Art Harris might have, but had the wherewithal to do it.
Yeah.
But again, it's just, well, what will they think in Memphis, or or something like that. So now let's fast forward a little bit to when Dave Johns won the Mr. America title. Grimek and Turpak had a little conversation because we've been putting the Mr. Americas on the cover. And Grimek asked Turpak, should I put him on the cover? Well, yeah, they always referred back to the first time Bob either put Davis on the cover or Kono. The magazine distributor at the time, and this would have been, 25, 30 years before, at least, called them up and said, don't put minorities on the cover. It just kills sales. Well, so that embedded in their head for, ever and a day. Yeah. Anyway, Turpak said, well, look, if we don't put him on the cover, it's going to be obvious. Put him on the cover. And if it kills the sales, it kills the sales. Well, it didn't, but they might have did the right thing for the wrong reason. But yeah. Turpak called me in when I put J.J. Marsh and Laura Creval on the cover. He said, you know what they told us about, back in 19 whatever, about putting blacks in. I said, John, these people won. They got a female. they're in the flow now. I said, and I told him, I said, look, I'm not just living and dying with the AAU. These people don't rate that kind of consideration. I'm sorry, they don't. They're friends, but they don't. Yes, and some of them would call up to me and ask, is this NPC headquarters? I said, it is now. I usually recognize the voice. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I took some heat from that, but he backed off because we were selling a little more. Nice. And here's the ironic thing. When I put women on the cover, Dietz loved it. Okay, Dietz was a lech, but it's the magazine looked new, modern.
Yeah.
Well, at least had look.
Yeah. And that's where Twin Labs came from, kind of based on
me?
I said Twin Labs came in based on you're building it up and looking more modern.
Well, that's what we ended up doing. They wanted to buy something that existed, and I ended up basically pumping the thing up to sellable level. And I must have done okay because they asked me if I would come up, go with the magazine.
I was going to ask you about that. So, yeah.
Yeah, Roy Hewlin and his wife came down and to here and took my wife and I out to dinner and said, we'd like you to come with the magazine. And Turpak had told me, he said, look, we're having these people come. Well, at that time, it was old man Bleckman and his attorney, Seymour Day. He said, if these people offer you a job and you want to take it, feel free. So I said, okay. And anyway, they came and they said, Hewlin said to me, we'd like you to come along with the magazine. I said, I don't know. I said, how, what's like, mortgage payments up there on Long Island? He said, well, what do you pay now? I said, $269.75 a month. Got a brick rancher. He said, you're going to have some sticker shock. And then he told me. And the other thing was my wife taught school and she had gotten tenure. And I really didn't want to uproot her. And I'll get Doc Leisner in this story. But I was still looking at it as, well, maybe I should do this. And I don't know. The wife said, well, if you want to, we will. But she figured she could get a job up there. But I called up Doc Leisner and I said, okay, Kathy's from an area probably more rural than I'm at. How does she handle Long Island? Doc had a response and said, she's just fine with it as long as she doesn't have to leave the yard. So I said, okay, message received.
And you knew Dr. Ken also because at the same time when you were building up MD, you got him to write for some articles, right?
Yeah. I forget. It's because we had the one power meet we had in the history of York Barbell, and this is where Dietz started liking me. We actually had on Ridge Avenue. My God, I took in money hand over fist. In entry fees and stuff like that. We had lifters. His kids had a bar and a restaurant, and they were selling stuff there, foodstuffs there, and outrageous prices, and people were buying it. Mm-hmm. So anyway, this was now suddenly these contests could be a money-making proposition. Mm-hmm. He said to me, why the hell are we screwing around these pissing Olympic meets where they'd get 30 people,
Yeah.
Well, from a crowd, 15 lifters. And so he told me, he said, you can have one of these anytime you like. You don't have to ask me. Mm. So I started, and I wasn't trying to, play both sides here because this is how he looked at it. You were either Turpak's guy or you were his guy. Mm. And mostly the plant people were his people and the office people were Turpak's. I was suddenly in no man's land. But anyway, like I said, he died in 1986. So, I didn't have to dance that much,
Who did?
Who
did? Dietz?
Dietz.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's odd circumstances there. I'll tell you that on an email. Okay. Anyway, it's, so
you were thinking, so you didn't go to Twin Labs. You decided to stay at
right.
York.
Well, Twin Labs got desperate. They said, well, you know what? You could work there at York Barbell and we could rent the space. And, we just need you to get on the train once a week and come up here to us and meet the, 7 Bleckmans, that there were 7 people that actually had an financial interest in Twin Labs. And I thought, well, I don't know. I just decided I wasn't going to do that because I could picture there, Mr. Bleckman, the elder Bleckman, nice man. You never know what the kids are like, and then you got multiple kids, you get different. I didn't think I could take that, so I thought, no, you guys just do it. And York kept, so we'll keep you on here, you doing customer service or, going to shows or whatever. So it wasn't like I didn't have a job.
Yeah.
Thank God I didn't have to make that choice. But yeah, I must have done okay. And like I said, I was lucky that I got the quality, the number and the quality of photojournalist that I did. Just lucky. And like particularly Lord Zeller.
Well, it sounds like you worked really hard also. So I'm sure it wasn't all.
Well, I did 70 hours a week. That's true. I was burnout. I don't know what, for 2 years I was burnt out. But I'll tell you, I was lucky with Art Zeller. Cliff Sawyer ran a WABA Mr. World, Mr. Miss World contest in October. I think it was 1985. Serge Nubret had contracted with Art to come and photograph the contest for him. However, he neglected to get Art a room. And the contest hotel was booked, and there weren't that many other place lodgings. And Art was he got there at midnight. And I was sitting in the lobby. He's before, he doesn't know, I doesn't have a room. I'm trying to call Serge Nubret. So happened I had a double room. And I walked up and introduced myself. I said, and I told him who I was, and I established my ties to Grimek, who he admired a lot. I said, I got a room. If you can't work out something for yourself, I've got an extra bed, no charge, So he took it. We were friends. He told me a lot of stuff over the weekend about Weider, about Marvin Eder, just stuff from the 50s, and his experiences with Weider. Most people don't realize Art was a decent physique guy himself and appeared in a number of Weider ads. So, back in his day.
So when you say Marvin Eder and Weider, you're talking about how he got his amateur status removed.
Just how he trained, some of that. Oh. And, he really only stopped bodybuilding when he was 19. So, what could he have turned into?
Yeah, he was amazing.
Okay, if there's one physical specimen, all right, there might be 2, but one physical specimen I ever saw who I think had better genetics than Grimek, it was Marvin Eder. I mean, he could have out Grimek if you want to go that way.
Wow. I met him once at AOBS, but obviously he was an older man at the time.
Yeah.
I think it was my first AOBS. It was probably like 2001 or so. And I asked to take a picture with him. I remember his wife teasing him, be like, "Oh, you want to take a picture with my famous husband?" Like, yeah, I do. So I had that picture. So I probably find it.
I was told he was a nice guy.
Yeah.
Along with it. Like I said, I think he needed some refinement that he's 19,
Yeah.
I think he could have been better than Grimek. And if you're going to ask me who I think had the best, if I could have anybody's physique that ever lived, I'm going to tell you more than you want to know here.
No, let's hear it.
I hold Jack Dellinger in high. I liked his physique better than even John Grimek's.
Really?
Not just because his name was Dellinger. And I think I told you I impersonated Jack unintentionally a couple of times on the phone in customer service. We would get, when I did customer service, or the girls in customer service got some of these real old guys who remembered, the 1949 Mr. Chicago contest or something. They always turned them over to me. And I got this guy one time. I guess they told him, I'm going to turn you over to Jan Dellinger. And he heard, this old guy heard Jack Dellinger. He peed himself. And he gets me on the phone and he's talking to me. He said, "My God, I saw you in magazines." I give him 3 strikes. No, he said, "That's Jack. I'm Jan." well, you his son or his grandson? No. And, but I saw Jack and I saw you. He went back to you.
Yeah.
In 1953 at some big contest in Chicago. You were terrific. I corrected him again. Now, my rule is if you go to that one more time, I'm playing along.
That's a good
He
rule.
did. He
Yeah.
did. And I said, okay, you got me. I was looking pretty good there in 53, wasn't I? My calves and hamstrings are really coming out. What'd you think? Well, yeah, you were terrific. I made his day.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
sorry.
like give him a thrill. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm a bad person.
No, you're not. You made it was a good thing. I have a couple of questions before on the history. So what happened once? What did you do at York once the magazines went away? Because that was a big part of your job.
Yeah,
you still worked there for another 15 years or so, right?
Yes. Well, like I said, I did a lot of customer service. Occasionally worked the retail store if they needed help. Let me see, what else did I do? I did shows. That was, I could go to strength coaches shows, football shows, things like that.
Did you help run that? I guess it was '98, I believe, that when the York Barbell Strength Spectacular.
Oh yes, God, I ran it. Yeah. Basically, that nearly did me in, honestly.
Why? Just amount of work, you mean, or?
Well, it was hot. I was running around here and there. I had some of the guys in the strength in the lifting contest, not powerlifting, the strongman contest. We had to get double body weight, or I think it was that, or body weight and a half for leg press. We were doing a rep leg press with double body weight. I had to take one very nice large man over to the warehouse and weigh him on the freight scale to get an accurate weight.
So that's how big it was.
But yeah, there's just a lot of running around at the last minute and doing stuff. And for a while in the afternoon, I was, they had the wheelbarrow. What do you call it? The wheelbarrow race. Well, somebody has to walk them back, so I was doing that. I was a little dehydrated. There's no question. But yeah, just and officiating some of the events, like we have them do dumbbell presses and for reps.
So
and
they're doing everything there.
That's always a minefield.
Yeah.
I think that was the time. I think that was the time that I saw Robert Francis. My God, there's a chinning machine. Robert did 21, 2, 3 chins. Good ones. Not like this full body dry heave stuff, that they do. He was just up and down, all the way down.
I know Robert well, actually. So he lives on Long Island, and
it was one. It was just impressive to me. When he did 10, and in the way he did them in particular, it's like, okay, I'm impressed, Robert.
Yeah. So I knew because in the late, let's see, when was this? Probably, oh God, 2008 or 9, something like that. The same back problems I mentioned earlier. It was probably around that same time, but there was a period when it was chronic and I couldn't get rid of it. So, and I was like every pain, every step for like a year and a half. And I was on IronHistory asking, because all these guys who have way more experience than I do, for a decade I was the youngest guy on there. Now there's a few people younger than me, but but Robert, he's all into high intensity training, and he has his own kind of gym in his basement in Long Island. I lived in Queens, New York City at the time, so it was probably a good 45 minutes, half hour. But he told me, and I went out there. I don't remember if it was twice a week or once a week, but I think I went out there twice a week. And basically, we did a full body routine, but basically had me doing the Nautilus, like back extension and the rotating torso to get that movement in there. And over a period of about 6 months, I went away, but it had been a year and a half of chronic pain. So I got to know Robert quite well then. But yeah, he always had definitely an impressive upper body there. And he was.
Oh, yeah. And he was at least 200-pound guy doing this.
Yeah.
I was, I was impressed. I wrote about it. I think that book, but like I said, I was just like, wow.
Well, let's finish up with just a few. So we've kind of gone through history there and a lot of things. I'm just going to mention a few names, some I've seen you mention before, but some I'm just wondering if you have any stories about. You may or may not. But I
Mhm.
believe you might, like, I saw somewhere mentioned that Milo Stuyborn stopped by York, perhaps when you were there at some point.
1978, I think it was. Whenever they had the World Championships in Gettysburg, he stopped by. Of course, now I'm sharing an office with Grimek, and he doesn't know me from a bale of hay, but he's talking to Grimek, and yeah, they introduced him, and he looked very, fit. He was in his 80s somewhere. Very chest, big barrel chest. He looked like a wrestler
Yeah.
more than a weightlifter. He looked like the wrestler he was. Um, he was a nice. Oh, Jim Flanagan down there in Florida, a high intensity guy, trained at
Yeah.
Milo's place. He
Okay.
has Milo's stories. Uh, Milo is an impressive man. I do know. Grimek asked him. He said, "You wrestled Charles Rigaloo place." Oh yeah, I said, "I in Europe." He said, "Who
Wow.
won?" He said, "Well, if we were in a Germanic culture, I won. If we were in a French culture, he won. If we were, somewhere else's draw, that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
things."
yeah, yeah. God,
Yeah.
two legends. Amazing. Um, what about Jules Bacon? Do you have any stories on Jules Bacon?
Not that I care to tell.
Okay. When did he work there though? Until a certain time, or
No, he was gone okay. By the time I got up to I-83, he was gone. He was retired. I think he retired from Borg Warner, and he might have been a draftsman. I'm not sure. He was also kind of selling fasteners part time. For a long time he owned the oh crap, what was it called? He owned his own little key kind of health club under the Knights of Columbus building up on George Street across from the old post office. You could pretty much just go in and get a shower, steam.
in York?
Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you lived in
Uh,
one of Bob Hoffman's houses at some point, right?
I think he did. I think he did.
Okay. And what about?
I'm trying to not speak ill of the dead. I know I've done it here before. Um, Jules was not my favorite. Let's just say that. Move
Okay.
on.
Okay. No, that's fine. That's fine. You've been more than open. What about did you ever see Sid Klein anywhere?
No, never
No.
met Saquon.
What about Vic
We
Ball?
talked about him a lot, but no.
Did besides you always hear a story about Sid Klein and Grimek about the dumbbell pressing. Is there any other
Right.
story you know about?
Well, I know Grimek got a lot of Klein got Grimek a lot of early publicity with Mark Berry in Strength Magazine, the Milo
Yeah,
publications,
yeah,
which changed titles from time to time.
sure.
I know that. Sid Klein. To be honest with you, I don't really have that many Sid
Okay, that's
Klein.
fine. I'm just going. These are just kind of random. What about Vic Boff? Did you have any interaction with Vic Boff?
Oh gosh, uh, Vic Boff and I are the great unasked trivia answers to the great unasked trivia question in the lifting game.
What do you mean?
What guys lived in Red Line, Pennsylvania?
Oh,
I'm one. Vic Boff's the other.
okay.
Vic spent the first 10 years of his life here in Red Line, living in Red Line. His brother ran around with Hinky Haynes. Hinky Haynes played on the New York Yankees with Babe Ruth. Anyway, Vic's was from literally here in Red Line. He told me where he lived. And then about age 10, his dad got a job in New York City. And I forget in what capacity, but that had to be culture shock even then. So that's how he got to New York. So anyway, when in I guess 1970 was the first time not 70, but like 76, 77, first time I ran into Vic. He found out I lived in Red Line, and I was golden from there on. He asked me about old storekeepers and stuff like that, who I happen to know.
Yeah.
One of them had a collectible shop, model airplanes and stuff like that. And I bought some things from that guy when I'm 10. And he said, well, you know, that guy's a pretty good lifter when he was young and was lifted with York Barbell Hoffman on occasion. No, I didn't, you know. So, you know, you learn stuff from Vic like that.
Yeah, that's it.
I have immense respect for Vic, even though he liked to go out and lay in the snow. But no, Vic was a great guy, and I miss him a lot.
Yeah, I hear a good thing. I never met Vic, but know several people who used to just have phone conversations with him all the time, and obviously he knew everyone going back to the Iron game.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
he knew everybody at Weider. He knew everybody at York.
yeah.
He's another guy that somehow managed to stay out of the line of fire. And he always ended up a phone conversation, or even when he talked to you face to face, carry on. You know,
Yeah,
that was him. Yes.
Yeah. What about Dick Smitty?
Oh my gosh. There's a guy, speaking about unheralded and underrated. I mean, if you knew him, and you know, he was great. Bill March would tell you, Bill St. John would tell you, the great thing about Smitty, he would do anything. He wasn't like some coach that, you know, well, I can't do this or I can't do that or it's beneath me. Did anything. Squired around Bob Huffman later in life, ran errands, for Alda Ketterman, which was Bob's like common law wife, and Turpac and things like that, which got him in the doghouse with Dietz. But no, Smitty was a remarkable guy in a very understated kind of way. He was very at one with Dr. Ziegler. And I mean the electronic muscle stimulator part of Dr. Ziegler, not, first of all, Dr. Ziegler's, shall we say, drug reputation is absurd, ridiculous, and overblown. If you just look at his resume, and this is not your jock doctor, but there were three guys who could use that isotron. That and there's various generations of it that Ziegler developed. There's three guys, well, two other guys Ziegler would allow to use it. One of them was Bill St. John. One of them was Smitty. Everybody else didn't have the brains God gave in that for this. Ziegler, by the way, also had his own slant in bodybuilding, which is how he had Bill St. John train. If you're interested, I'll tell you. Yeah. But anyway,
so
Smitty had worked for a number of every so often wealthy type guys, like you know, errand boy, house boy. One guy lived on a boat, was extremely wealthy.
Smitty so also, saying, as he was a trainer, he was also
before he became York Barbell.
Okay.
He also studied animal husbandry at Cornell. But Smitty was just a great. Okay, Smitty taught me a lot about waiting on customers in the barbell business, about the barbell business, about the esoteric, even the political side of the barbell business. Smitty was a great mentor to me in particular. And like I said, I talked to the other guys, you know, that when like March, St. John, when they were in their prime, Smitty would do anything to help them. You know, I mean, drove them places, you know, and of course, if you were in a car with Bob Huffman driving, oh dear God, it's like Mr. Magoo. In fact,
my grandfather was like that.
Like he started wearing one of these, what I call them, pork pie hat or hats that, you know, the brim had turned up. My God, he looked like the big version of Mr. Magoo. Anyway, no, Smitty was a great guy who, you know, a lot of people, he was a great lifting coach, lifting coach. Bob Bednarski and Lee James would be two examples. Unfortunately, they're both dead. But Smitty had a good eye for watching other sports and okay, these are the muscles that you need to train for football, swimming, you know, pick it out, whatever it is. He was very good, very sharp,
nice,
kind of old school, but still knew his stuff.
Cool. And so you brought up Ziegler. What were your thoughts on Ziegler there? You kind of.
There's one guy I never met. I wished I had. He was dying of cancer when. I was just actually 77, 70. I think he died shortly thereafter. He was a very intelligent man, very intelligent. not the jock doctor that he's portrayed. That's just a hell of a disservice to him. I never met him, but between Smitty, Bill St. John, and Bill March, I feel I do know him.
Hmm.
And if you go to Dale Credico's Titan Slacks of Deso band, I did a feature on Dr. Ziegler, and I think this is in the fall of 2016. And shortly thereafter was one done by Bill March and then one done by Bill St. John.
I think I remember the Bill March one. Yeah.
I helped organize that. I didn't
Okay.
write, I helped organize it. But Ziegler, read that article about Ziegler. This man was sharp. He also was not in this for a buck. He could have sold that isotron for money long ago. He also put a fail-safe in it because he said people will just try and reverse engineer it, and I'm not going to let him. He had more going on in his head than okay, I'm told he was a very colorful figure. He's big, he was tall, he walked around Civil War garb sometimes, and maybe sometimes drank too much, but he was a very sharp man, served in the Marines. In fact, I think he got left on one of the beaches in a battle in Korean War. He told St. John that he said, I had some medical training. He said, I'm seeing the medics come out and they're taking guys off the beach. He's, let's face it, the ones we think we can save, the ones we leave we don't think are going to make it. He was one of the last ones off the beach, and he made it. Yeah. So, it's, if you would like, I'll have you talk to Bill St. John. He can give you a much better, because he was intimately involved with the guy. I always felt I knew Smitty clearly was priming me up to do years and years ago that the Ziegler article. I believe this with all my heart. He was telling me stuff about Ziegler and what the isotron did and this thing and that.
Yeah, I read it, but I don't remember enough about it. I got to go back and read it.
I am convinced. Smitty was like, okay, this is going to be the last doe wide standing. I'm going to pass along my Zieglerisms to him, and I want him. Hopefully, this dimwit will write something about Ziegler that's not the jock doctor thing, Yeah, so, and I've done that, and like I said,
well, all the listeners should go read that on Dale's site. Was it
Titan Slacks of Deso band?
Yeah, so it doesn't roll off the tongue, but yes, it's a great site.
Yeah, I think it was in 2016, but. Time marches on. I'm getting to be like Grimek. This was 8 years ago, and it was 18 years ago. So
I got a couple more names here. Let's see. What about? So we were talking about Weider, but what about like Weider? Because everyone liked Grimek. Everyone respected Grimek. Were there any like Arnold or Franco? Did anyone ever talk? Like, do you ever see interaction with any of the Weider guys, with the York guys at all, or with Grimek at all?
Well, there was a time in the '60s. The Weider guys, the York guys, scrupulously avoid the Weider guys.
Yeah.
And Bill Marsh told me, he said one of them approached him at a lifting. He said, I told him, get away from me or I'll smack you. Somebody's not going to take a picture of you and I and put it in the Weider magazine. That was March's stance. I think, I know this. Leroy Colbert would kind of be identified as a Weider guy. Although I don't think he was religious about it. But anyway, I know Val Vasilev had a conversation with him about getting into the vitamin business after Val went through the Mr. America stuff. Val, by the way, Val Vasilev's story is tremendous. They should make a movie of it. I did an article about him.
Yes, I read that recently, actually. Again, I
even Val liked and praises me to this day. Should make a movie of it.
On that same website. You should check it out.
Yeah. I'm sorry. But there's the other odd thing about Vasilev was he was of Russian extraction. He's very proud of it, and he had an uncle who was in one of the Russian circuses as a strongman.
I have his book somewhere here.
But in the 1960s, that probably wasn't a good thing to advertise. If you were that background, if you were running to be Mr. America.
No.
It's not the skin color thing, but it's an even more subtle political thing, which who knows how they would have interpreted.
Yeah, okay, especially at that time.
Well, let me tell you this. Vern Weaver told me this. He said, the year before? No, 2 years before, he said Edie's girlfriend got a bungalow. He went to the Mr. America contest, had a bungalow, and he said, damn if he didn't end up right next door to Perry and Mabel Rader. Well, the Raiders knew he wasn't married to her, and he said they went around and, well, Vern's shacked up with this woman, not his wife. So I mean, that's how political it was. I mean, they were looking for a Boy Scout, very muscular, probably white Boy Scout.
Yeah.
And so it was.
And the Raiders are also very religious, right? I mean,
yeah, and they were fine people, but it's that American Gothic couple standing there with pitchfork. But and then I know Grimek told me there was I'm not sure I got the right name of the bodybuilder, but there's a Southern California bodybuilder who just talked. I don't think he had a speech impediment. Well, maybe he did, but he came off not good when he talked. Mm-hmm. He got killed in the interviews. I'm not saying either one, but the judges exchanged thoughts and ideas and things like that. So
yeah, so it was. I mean, people have hard to wrap their head around that nowadays because they think it's just it's a muscular contest. That's how we see bodybuilding nowadays.
Well, that's how they want it now. Yeah.
But
I think that in those days they were looking for the male counterpart of the Miss America.
Yeah.
And they thought they were going to send him on tour or something. They never did. But no, anyway, that's what you're up against. Did I go off the track here? Who was I supposed to be talking about?
Just if any Weider people had ever interacted.
Well, like I said, I knew Vasilev had several conversations with Colbert about going into the vitamin business. Offhand, that's the only one I know. But guys out in Southern California, like Jack Dellinger, I think Botnick was out there. I think.
Was it you? I feel like I saw a letter, or you mentioned a letter, or someone mentioned a letter that back must have been '68 or something, where Arnold wrote a letter to York, asking to, hey, so you have a job or something. I'm trying to get to America. I know I've heard of the letter or seen the letter.
Yeah, he was fishing around for that.
Yeah.
Let me think now. Something else just popped into my head. Nuts. Arnold played both sides once he got slightly established. Because Joe made enough promises to him about putting his picture here and paying him money there and, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
He started casually sending articles and pictures to Grimek. And then, of course, Grimek would put him in the magazine, and Weider would run and bark at Arnold. And, I don't know how they got there. I had nothing to do with this, It must be these damn photographers or sent the article too, did they? Well, anyway, he did that a couple of times. And again, if nothing else, it was just to throw the fastball at Weider's head. Yeah. Weider knew he wasn't going to go anywhere, And Arnold truly was beholden to him for getting him over here.
Yeah.
But, there's limits to everything.
Yeah.
So that one I do know took place. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The last name I have on my list here that we didn't really talk about, but I think is long York history. I don't know a ton about, but like Dick Bachtell. Do you know much about him?
Who?
I don't know. I might be saying it wrong. Dick Bachtell. I don't
know. Dick Bachtell.
Bachtell.
Yeah, okay. I knew Dick a little bit. Dick worked up at the plant on 83, and once in a while he'd come down to see either Turpak or Grimek. They used to call him the little old winemaker. He made wine on the side. He did anything on the side. Made chests, like furniture and, regular travel chests and stuff like that. He was a big hunter. I know that.
He did work at York, though, for a while, right? Was he a York employee at some point?
Well, I think since the 1930s. He wasn't with the first wave. It was early in the second, and he stayed.
Yeah. Ruben had like a junior barbell set that was made for his son or something.
Yeah.
Ruben had that.
Dick was from Hagerstown, Maryland, where there's 2 or 3 other guys at the time, or middleweight kind of guys. Robert Snyder was one, and there's another one whose name's escaping me. They were, really good lifters, probably back in the Jowett, American Continental Weightlifting Association days. The third guy's coming 3 hours from now will come to me. Anyway, but Bachtell is, I never had that many interactions with him.
But that was he kind of came around there. All right.
Yeah, just hello, Dick. And okay, Dick was somewhat like Jules Bacon, liked to gripe. I shouldn't say this again. Speaking of the dead, and he never did anything to me, but Dick had his grievances
with York.
Yeah, so did Stanko. I mean, with Hoffman in particular, and particularly when Hoffman started throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year at softball. And like Stanko said, the damn guy made us buy our lifting shoes and belts, and no, they had some legitimate grievances, and they went through some stuff, particularly early on. Grimek told me once, he said there were 2 occasions when the doors almost went shut. The thing that bailed them out is World War II. The onset of that, nobody else could sell barbells. They could make, but they had a foundry, and they made money on the foundry, with war materials and things like that. And a lot of those contracts they kept till the early 1960s. I'm sorry, the historians don't tell you this, and I was like, my God, it's right out there. What are you looking at? I mean, if it wouldn't have been for World War II and the fact Bob had a foundry, I'm pretty sure they didn't run aground. I just am. So
yeah, they had that, and then they had, then supplements came in, right? I think you had mentioned somewhere later. I think it was you that I read somewhere that you said that later on that most supplements were made by about 6 companies, but Bob had his.
That's still when I worked. There were 5, maybe 6 labs in North America that made everybody's supplements. Weider played that to his advantage. First of all, if you could monopolize, and he had enough volume to do it, 2, maybe 3 of these people, you were starting to cut out the people on the underside of the market. Mm-hmm. And what Weider also did, and I had this confirmed to me by somebody that worked for him, let's say, remember that anabolic mega pack?
Yeah.
Remember that?
Vitamins, basically.
It had a lot of things in it. And what he would do, as time went on, he'd start pitting one lab against another. Like, okay, I want this price. I want to be able to sell it, what I pay for it, at this price, not this price. And if you don't do it, I'm going to take my business over here to number 2. And he did the same thing with number 2 and number 3. And so eventually what they started doing was taking out some things to make it more cost effective for them. So God knows at the end of the run of that thing, what was in it and how much had been taken out. But I had someone who worked for Weider in the supplement division tell me that that's what he did. That's what he demanded, price concessions, and that's what they did in response. So anyway, and remember, there was a big hoo-ha. At one point, he got fined about $300,000 by the Federal Trade Commission for that particular product. And all the anti-Weider people were saying, oh, he's getting crushed. He's getting this. He's getting that. He's getting what he deserves. He was still selling the same stuff in Europe at the same time. Yeah, he was not making money in the American market, but he was making money over there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so, that it's.
Was there any with York's supplements and their protein, was there any improvements or changes over the ages, or is it kind of the same?
Pretty much the same stuff.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing. Take a look at the ads. A 1-pound can of protein was selling for $5.
I got this guy here. Hold on.
In about 1955, whenever they started.
got a bunch of Hoffman stuff. This is probably the most classic one, but this
Yeah,
this
yeah, but
box.
well, let's just stick with the protein powder right now. The 1 pound can of that stuff sold for $5 when it first entered the market. They were still selling it for a 1 pound can for $5 in 1978.
Wow.
At least 20, 25 years had gone by. So, it's like, how much money were they making on that initially?
Yeah,
Well, the profit had to be just outlandish.
yeah.
And it's kind of like Grimek told me one time, or not Grimek, Turpak told me one time. He said, after World War II, we started getting barbells, small barbells, in not just sporting goods stores, but even some of these department stores and things like that. They were about the only one that had them. And again, that's thanks to World War II and the ban on scrap iron. So that was the first
That's
big
actually
plus.
right up there on top of my shelf. Right there is a Victory Bell. Actually, it's in the swing bell.
Okay.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the concrete. What do they call the concrete plates? It's slipping my tongue right now.
Oh
It,
man.
it was.
I can tell you where they were made.
They have a different name for it. I can't remember, but yeah.
Yeah. They anyway, but they were made
Composite. That's what they called it, right? They call it
okay, yeah.
composite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The catch-all term, whether it's rubber, it's material, metal,
Yeah.
or concrete, or whatever. Anyway, Jules Bacon told me that those sand plates were made in a foundry, a limestone foundry over in East Prospect, which is 7-8 miles east of York, during World War II. That's where they made them.
Hmm.
Now, let me get back here. That 1 pound can of protein,
Yeah.
still selling for $5 in 1978. Turpak told me one time that the first big bonanza they got was when they were the only ones selling barbells, and they had them in sporting goods stores, department stores, because we didn't have fitness specialty stores, but they were getting out there. York was in its heyday. The next thing that came along in the 50s was the protein. And they made, like I said, outlandish profit margin on that.
Yeah.
Then in the 60s, the isometrics and the rack thing came along. And that's pretty much where the evolution of York Barbell stopped.
Yeah. Yeah. That
As far
was.
as equipment, or again, back to the third world, Hoffman was no longer, in day-to-day operations. And although he did, Smitty told me, mix the suntan lotion formula himself for a long time. He didn't want anybody to know what the formula was. Anyway,
Good,
it's
right? I said this. I've heard the suntan lotion was actually one of the better products. It actually worked well.
Yes, it was, and so was the muscle rub.
Yeah. Oh.
The FDA made him take the tragacanth out of it, but I can tell you, I got that muscle rub when it still had tragacanth in it. My wife's grandmother, who was in her 90s, swore by that stuff. She said it was the best stuff she ever had. Suntan lotion, the same thing, and I forget when somebody else tested, well, it's an SPF, I don't know, 5, and it's.
Want to try it right now? I can put some of this.
No.
It's still in there.
No, I was thinking about but yeah, that's the one I remember. But I have seen the bottle back when they sold Huffman's house on Lightner's Hill. Jeez, how long ago was that? Maybe still in the 1990s. An attorney bought it. He brought a box over some things like those. So I found this in the closets. You want them, So yeah, they were good stuff. They were.
Well, Jan, I think we've covered a lot. I think we've been going for about 2 hours here. I think we should wrap it up. I just want to thank you. I learned a ton of stuff here. Hopefully you found it enjoyable. I wanted to put on you've been telling some, I've heard maybe half those stories before, half I hadn't. To hear it out of your own mouth with the little details was really a treat for me. And hopefully it will be for other people too. And I just think it's great getting you on record. And I just want to also thank you, not just for video, but just for the years and years of, sharing both on IronHistory.com and on Facebook, and you're just always a fountain of some, you just have a history of it, but you also have a passion for it, and combine those things is really
Right.
special for people like me who are really interested in the history of Iron Games. So thank you for sharing all of your life really with us.
Well, you're welcome. And I'll say this, I enjoyed it. If you want to do this again, I'm up for it. Just let me know when.
All right, I will. Thanks so much. So I'm going to end it here, but I appreciate Jan. I'll see you online, and I'm signing out. Guys, if anyone wants to come on to IronHistory.com, Jan, he posts around the internet, but he has 1,000 posts of various stories over the years. We have an awesome search engine with 20 years worth of interesting history of any subject on Iron Game has been discussed there at some point. So it's free, and just go ironhistory.com. And Jan, thank you, and I'll see you later.
Very good. You have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Thanks.